Okay, so welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon here on the East Coast. So welcome to today's panel discussion, Defining and Elevating Student Voice and Agency. I'm Lorna Cameron. I work with the Client Success Team here at the Learning Bar. The Learning Bar is a research institute with offices in Fredericton, New Brunswick, and also we have an office in Newcastle, New South Wales, Australia. And we specialize in student assessments, literacy solutions, and professional learning. As a former educator, I'm honored to host this important conversation today. So today we're going to dive into what it really means, not just to listen to students, but to truly empower them as partners in shaping their learning experiences and their school communities. So we know that student voice and agency are essential ingredients for creating schools that are inclusive, engaging, and truly responsive to the needs of all learners. And currently there's excellent examples globally that really highlight the student-educator partnership in just shared decision making. So today we have an incredible panel of experts and practitioners who are here to bring their rich perspectives on what it looks like to define student voice with clarity, embedded into school culture, and elevated in ways that drive real change. So I'm going to introduce our panelists today. To start, we have Jacqueline Hagel. Jacqueline is an educational consultant with over 20 years of experience in schools and more than 10 years on top of that with the student achievement and supports at the Ministry of Education Saskatchewan. She's led the provincial implementation of the student voice data through the OurSCHOOL surveys, gathering feedback from over 100,000 students and 7,000 teachers annually. Jacqueline is passionate about integrating student voice into educational decisions to improve outcomes and well-being. Next, joining us, we have Noel Burke. He's an educational consultant with over 50 years of experience, recognized for his work in lifelong learning and educational innovation. He founded Learn, the community learning center initiatives in Quebec, and the School of Extended Learning at Concordia University. Noel co-founded the Next School Initiative and serves on the Quebec Education Ministry's Advisory Board on Education. He's also a seasonal lecturer at McGill University and principal partner of EdWorks Consulting. Sarah Blackwater is Director of Learning, overseeing educational initiatives and curriculum implementation for Sotina students. She has led the implementation of the OurSCHOOL surveys, gathering valuable feedback to develop professional learning opportunities. Sarah is committed to creating an environment where students feel a sense of belonging and empowerment. And to round out our panel is Vanessa Gold. Vanessa is a doctoral student in the Department of Integrated Studies of Education at McGill University, and she's studying pedagogical change processes in secondary and post-secondary schools. Her research areas informing her work include student voice, educational change, photo voice, and action research. Vanessa is currently overseeing the implementation of the first Next School in Quebec, Canada. And she seeks opportunities for collaboration, innovation, and creativity when possible. So throughout our discussion today, we'll explore how schools can move from gathering student input to sharing power and how agency can transform classrooms, policies, and outcomes for the better. We'll walk through several key questions today, and we'll also open the floor for conversations at the end, as well as I have a few colleagues who are monitoring the chat, so feel free to put any questions you may have into the chat. As you noticed, I am recording today's session. As well, you'll receive a copy of the webinar after the session. And also, if you'd like to connect with any of our panels today, you can reach out and we can make that happen. So let's dive in. So I want to begin to ground our conversation here with a shared understanding of the term student voice. So it's a phrase we often hear, but it can mean different things in different contexts. So Jacqueline, I'm going to start with you. How do you define student voice, and how does it go beyond just listening to students? So feel free to share those examples or reflections from your own experience. So pass it over to you, Jacqueline.
Thank you. Good day, everyone, and a heartfelt thanks to Lorna for her assistance in organizing today's opportunity. Well, for me, student voice involves student agency, which means it's allowing students to participate in the decisions regarding their own education. This can include contributing to classroom layout or selecting topics for study, but key to prioritizing student voice mean that teachers adjust the power dynamic to consider students as partners in their educational process. So as leaders in education, we're all aware that student outcomes are influenced by more than just curriculum and assessment. We recognize that student engagement, well-being, school safety, a positive sense of belonging, positive relationship with peers and staff all play critical roles. But one of the most effective and often underused levers for enhancing these factors is student voice. However, student voice isn't merely about giving students a chance to speak. Its true power lies in how we as educators respond to what students share. So when students start to see their ideas and concerns reflected in classroom practice, school policies, culture, they begin to understand that their voice has weight. They realize that it matters. And more importantly, they realize that they matter. And this recognition fosters student engagement, empowering students and increasing their investment in their own learning journey. So, critically, student voice has to extend beyond surveys and token input. It needs to be involved and partnered in that culture of partnership, where we treat students as collaborators in their learning experience, where we're not just teaching them, we're learning alongside them. We learn how they learn best. We learn how to create safe spaces and how to create a culture of where all students can thrive. So how do we do this in a structured way? Well, in my experience in Saskatchewan, we used the OurSCHOOL survey, which was administered to students in grade 4 to 12, providing with the chance to gather insights from students once or twice a year, offering the safe and anonymous space for students to share their experience socially, emotionally, academically. So then schools, divisions, First Nation education authorities could use that data to inform and shape their well-being programs, improve inclusivity, instructional strategies based on how students actually felt or feel about their learning environment. But again, it comes down to us. Data without response is merely information. So when we act, we validate voices and we model the very responsiveness we wish to hear from our students and our school culture. So to illustrate this, I'm just going to give you one example of effective school student voice, which was an example in Southern Saskatchewan school. Following the implementation of the OurSCHOOL survey, the principal reflected on the comments in her open-ended question, like what would make your school a better place, along with survey measures like student engagement, sense of belonging, and saw the need for a more inclusive space in her school playground. So she used those results to raise community awareness and funds to support the building and design of a new inclusive playground. The project not only improved the physical space, but it strengthened the sense of ownership and belonging amongst the students. She also received a national award for her work. So a school that listens is a school that learns. And when we lead with students' voice in mind, we don't just improve schools, but we inspire students.
Thanks, Jackie, for that wonderful example. And I can see that your passion there is just as mine is in this realm of work. So I thank you. And it's clear from listening to you speak that it's about more than offering input. like you said, it's that influence, that agency, and that partnership in shared decision making. So I want to build on that a little bit deeper here and dive into inclusivity a little bit more. So as panelists, we were talking before the discussion today, and we're talking about many times that we have students that may feel hesitant to participate in our surveys or feel confident in speaking up, and they may be quieter, perhaps marginalized or hesitant to offer their voice. So Noel and Vanessa, in your work with students in the Next School initiative, I'm wondering if you can share how do you ensure that student voice is embedded into school culture and really is representative of all students and just not those who are already confident or outspoken?
Vanessa, you want to take a start at that?
Yeah, sure. I think one important thing to note there is that even though it is really important to try and curate a environment where as many people as possible feel represented, you're not going to get everyone, because I think the underlying assumption is that when you get kids involved and they're participating in decision-making processes, then you've reached an endpoint of what educational change can be. But the truth is our learners are going to continue to change, and educational change that involves students, and it needs to consistently adapt and respond to their changing needs. So people in schools need to be constantly reflective, and my background is in working with schools. Sorry, I just got excited. That they need to learn how to be consistently flexible and consistently adapt to those changing needs. But there's a lot of things that you can be doing on a regular basis, and we can speak to some of them that happen in the Next School example we have that embed student voice as part of your educational change process. You want to speak to maybe the hub, Noel?
Yeah, so one of the features of the project and Next School came about from about 4 years of research we did around the globe about the most successful innovative practices in high schools. And there's a good background document that we can share with you, not from us, but from OECD, a 10-year longitudinal study around the world that confirmed our assumptions about 3 things that need to be present to really engage students more holistically. One of them is a daily learning hub at the beginning of the day for optimally 20 to 30 minutes in a small group setting. In other words, like the student-teacher ratio, and that's universally around 15 to 17 to 1, with a teacher coach. And that teacher coach's responsibility is to follow and accompany, I think it's a wonderful word here in Quebec, accompagnement, accompany students in their academic and social development. This is very powerful. We have to say, moderate success in it, because one of the biggest challenges in this whole discussion about student voice and student engagement is the ability for teachers and administration in schools to really kind of let go of control, let go of directing, let go of inventing the projects, etc. So there, and we can talk about that a little later as well, but the dominant culture and systems in school have a lot of safeguards and guardrails outside of which innovation happens. So this is one of the biggest challenges, but one of the biggest successes is the learning hub on a daily basis, the check-in. The other piece is student flex time, where we have built into every school day an hour where students actually get involved in courses that are of interest to them, life skills type courses, remediation and enrichment. So an hour of every day, 20% of student time over the year is dedicated to reaching out and responding to their interests and needs in a direct way, and not, not constantly trying to integrate these kinds of activities and courses and learning experiences, which in most cases teachers are trying to weave into the curriculum which, theoretically makes sense, but practically is very difficult with all of the other constraints and pressures on teachers. So those two features. There's the third is teacher flex time, but for the moment we're talking about student voice, and Learning Hub and student flex time are key features that we feel students are responding very well to.
Can I just piggyback off of that, Noel? Because I think something that is really important to highlight in those two things is the role of student decision-making and collaboration within those tasks. So the courses that are offered within the flex time, for example, were first developed with student suggestions in mind and then adapted and curated based on their responses in real time to make it more reflective of an environment that supports their interests or the environment that they want to learn in. So we've seen a transformation over time of what the courses look like that used feedback immediately based on what the kids have said about their specific needs. And I think that's a really hard mentality to adjust to, particularly, Jacqueline, you mentioned about the institutionalized hierarchical structure of schools. When you're trying to unpack that as a teacher who's trying to implement something with the power dynamic of being the person in charge while also maintaining that you want student feedback and their interest and participation in the process, it can be really hard to balance what those two things are because they're often in opposition to each other. And we've seen a lot of success with the hub as a area where students can connect with an individual teacher, and that hub can look different in each class to reflect the specific body of students. So when you ask about how you can make an embedded structure within the school representative of many students, it's that they are partnered with a person who is overseeing them for a duration of time that also is very closely monitoring their social and academic needs and supporting them on a much smaller scale. So they have kind of like a little cohort, a little family within a larger community that is working towards the same goals.
Yeah, and right on that last piece, they're also in a different social environment that doesn't have curriculum as its motivational force, right? And so we see as it unfolds for them that they start to make different kinds of relationships because the conversation in the Learning Hub is not about preparing for the next test or reading the next chapter or whatever the case may be. So
yeah. And highlighting the most important thing, which is what you learn from things like surveys and data needs to be followed up with student collaboration on the decision making and building their capacity for leadership.
Thanks, Vanessa and Noel. And we're going to delve into that system level change here in a little bit more. But I'd like to get Sarah's perspective on overseeing the surveys at Sutina.
Today, the survey has been really amazing for Sutina. It has given our students an opportunity to really have a voice within our schools, especially for those students who might not be as outspoken or as confident to share their ideas, or even that fear of being honest. The survey has really given us that stepping stone to really have those deep conversations within our leadership team. It has helped us to really develop our professional development goals and our plans for the upcoming school year. So one of the things that in overseeing the OurSCHOOL survey that's really important is not just taking that data and leaving it there, but showing the students that you were using that data. So for example, one of the things that we noticed was the kids didn't feel safe in one of our schools. It was a huge, it wasn't just males or it wasn't just females. And so we took that back to the students and we had those conversations with those students and had them come up with ideas of how can we make your school safer for you. And one of the things that came out of it was having a hall monitor. And it was a simple solution. And we now have a hall monitor who is a community member within our school that really provides those kids with a safe space. And they all call her like Auntie. And so that, it's really, from my perspective in overseeing the OurSCHOOL survey, it has really built that culture and climate within our schools of it being our student school. They have a voice within there. When we're developing those goals are kind of developed around the students and what the students need based on their student-teacher relationship. The students were so comfortable and confident sharing what their relationship was with their teachers, and were the teachers being responsive to their needs and their learning? And going back to, kind of the drawing board with our teachers and being like, okay, this is what we're seeing. This is where the students are at. And then going back to the students and having those conversations, and letting them know that we are taking that data and we are putting it back into what we're trying to plan for the school each year. It has really given the kids confidence to have like more of a voice, right? To come out and be like, okay, this is what we're struggling with. This is what we need, right? And we need more space to have like a calming place at the middle school. One of the things that, at an elementary level, you create those rooms where kids can go and escape to just have a moment, but not realizing that at the middle school, we needed a space like that. For a calming space for the kids to go to. And so that was another thing that kind of came out of it. So it's been really, like, from my perspective, it's been very beneficial, and very helpful in creating safe schools for our students to learn, building on their like identity, and making them feel confident. So yeah.
Thanks, Sarah. And I can only imagine, how proud those students must have felt that, an idea, uh, from their view, their perspective of what was needed in the school, how engaged they would be next year, and offering in their feedback and ongoing feedback as you worked on that initiative. So
Yeah.
thank you. I love hearing those. I want to
Yeah.
talk a little bit now about what happens when students move from having that voice to truly exercising that agency. So taking ownership of their learning and their environment. So Vanessa, you're, as I mentioned in the bio, and there are full bios I should mention on our website. You can take a look at those, but your research on education change. So from that research, what does the role of student agency play in shaping a more engaging and effective learning experience? How does it really change classrooms, relationships, and outcomes?
So for context, I'm studying basically student involvement in educational change through the Next School initiative. And the way that I've been doing that is through a photo voice activity where I've been talking to students about their experiences of school and the things that they would do differently in order to improve their engagement in learning. One of the things that I think is often overlooked is the amount of scaffolding that is required for students to be able to participate in that process. So some of the things that I've been working on is teaching or scaffolding skills and giving feedback, in being able to ask questions, in giving and in helping support students feel like they can speak, they can challenge the like general power dynamic that exists within schools, obviously not in a confrontational sort of way, but to build their capacity for leadership with people in their schools that they're going to be interacting with. So although student agency plays a huge role in increasing student engagement, they need to be given the skills first in order to do that. And students are very rarely consulted on their experiences and needs in changing schools. So although the first step is listening and being heard for students, it's, like I said before, really important to then involve them in the processes of change. So what we've learned every time I've done this photo voice activity, most students will say that their relationships with their peers is one of the most important things for their engagement, that spending time outside and being active, like those are the top three that happen all the time. So then the next step would be to involve students in helping come up with ideas to make their classroom learning experience more active, or what they think would be an ideal outside learning experience, or helping them guide that process without just doing it to them. So making sure that they're actively participating in those processes. Yeah, we want to be able for them to collaborate with the adults and then see that their voices or their contributions are being taken seriously.
Thanks, Vanessa. You're mentioning the level of student involvement, and it made me think of Roger Hartz. He was a sociologist for UNICEF, and he developed a ladder of children's participation.
Mhm.
It's been referenced in a lot of papers. It's referenced by the OECD, and it's really about conceptualizing levels of children's involvement in decision making. Adam Fletcher also references it in his voice, the Guide to Student Voice. Yes, I had it on my desk this morning. And he looks at that ladder through the lens of research and his experience in youth empowerment. And I encourage you all to just take a look at both of these pieces of work and perhaps, you know, use that ladder as a way to kind of self-assess the level of student decision making in your own school community. So thanks for bringing that point up,
Yeah,
Vanessa.
I would also add Dana Mitra also,
Okay.
MITRA, who has a lot of work on student engagement. But the one thing I wanted to say that I think has been missing so far is the importance of relationships and building trust as one of the most essential features when you're starting this process, really truly building relationships with students in order to then start working with them more deeply in their
Yes.
involvement.
Thanks, Vanessa. Now let's zoom out a little bit here back to the system level. And I'm going to come back to you, Noel. So we have school policies that impact grading, assessment, curriculum, discipline, and students are most affected by these policies, yet historically they've had little input. Now that depends on, you know, there have been some larger areas of input globally, but Noel, given the history and expertise in educational innovation, and really, I think I mentioned as an advocate for the personalization of learning. From your perspective, how can students be meaningfully involved in shaping those policies that impact their learning experiences? Like Vanessa was mentioning, the structures, the practices, the mindsets. What's necessary to make that work possible?
I think it begins with an awareness of a huge discrepancy that sort of drove us to the Next School project. And that discrepancy was here in Quebec, students perform globally about 10 to 15 percentage points better than the global averages in the OECD countries. That's 63 countries in the developed world. And we found that this success rate of about 85%, that successful completion of high school in the prescribed years, compared with the OurSCHOOL survey around student engagement. So we saw that about 30%, about 85% for student success. And this discrepancy is I think, what works against the work that we're all trying to do, and that's to improve not just student voice, but as you pointed out at the beginning, Lorna, empowering students. And so our hypothesis is that when students become more fully engaged, they produce better even on an academic level. And this has been proven over and over again. In addition, if we want to make that systemic rather than individual great teachers and individual great schools, we need to really unlearn and disassemble the monolith of the high school as we know it. And our work is particularly in high schools, where the wheels start to come off, as we all know. And so that means, for example, in the Next School that we're running right now, the first is a middle school program, which functions as a school within a school. So they have their own wing of the building. In that wing, there's student services, support services, timeout room, and 12 teachers that work with about 200 students. Only those teachers only teach those students. Those students are only work with those teachers and their peers. And we noticed very quickly the level of noise and misbehavior started to drop very quickly over the first year of operation because of the fact that I guess by inference they were really didn't have any choice but to be engaged in that smaller grouping, but everybody got to know everybody. So I think Vanessa just mentioned relationships, and improving those relationships really means deconstructing how high school functions. Schools are probably the most complex organizations that I could imagine, and very unpredictable by the nature of that, because it's not widgets we make, it's citizens we make, if we could put it that way. The notion of flattening that hierarchy. So the other feature of school systems is they're extremely hierarchy. Students depend on teachers for direction about every action they take. Ironically, teachers depend on administrators for most of the actions they take. And just to be upfront, it is really school administration that gets in the way. When we have found the group of teachers we work with, 12 teachers, we get them in a room and they go crazy. And they can very quickly, in 20 minutes, half an hour, really develop concrete solutions and actions around challenges that they face. Whereas in a staff of, in a school, the staff there is about 70 teachers. In a group of 70 people, well, we all know as teachers and facilitators of learning that it just doesn't work. So a big piece of that, and I don't mean that this, I hope that's not misinterpreted, student voice comes out of teacher voice. When teachers feel they're in control of what is going on, they tend to pass that control on to their students. And in a direct answer to your question, it's when students are involved in developing, identifying the challenges they want to work on and developing solutions and problem solving around that. One of the examples that we used at the beginning of the project was the Millennium Project, a United Nations initiative, which identified, and this is a great resource for educators around the table here today to look at, the Millennium Project identified the 15 greatest challenges for humans on the planet Earth over the next 20 years, including environment, ecology, gender equality, poverty, health, and on and on. But what's amazing is that when this this kind of matrix is presented to students, the biggest surprise at the beginning is how conversant they are already in these things and how aware they are of those problems and how interested they are in solving them. But we rarely have that occasion to have that conversation. So the model would suggest a teacher comes into a social studies classroom at the beginning of the year and said, what do you want to learn about? Here's the curriculum. Here's the kind of things we have to talk about, not the where, when, and the where and when of social studies, to use that example, but the why. And if you were, what would be the circumstances that would make things different, and what types? And have 3 or 4 themes going on instead of the teacher's one theme for the year. The 3, 4, 5 themes that erupt from a student conversation that then become very engaging for students because they're not solving. I always use the example, the old math problem of a train leaves New York at 9 a.m. and another train leaves Washington at 10 a.m. What time do they meet? And my answer is, well, it doesn't really matter unless they're on the same track. So, it's getting away from very adult teacher-centered direction. We talk about it all the time. We hear teachers talk about it all the time. But when we open the door to the classroom and go in, it's often very absent. So short answer, students very actively involved in developing their own pedagogy.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Noel and Vanessa. And I guess I'll give a little away a little secret here now. We've are excited to possibly have Noel and Vanessa join us on an upcoming webinar next year, and looking more at the Next School initiative and the innovative practices that they've put in place there to really, to look and address some of those existing pedagogy and processes that exist in our current education system. So I'd like to take a shift now and look at some of the practical strategies that schools and districts can use to guide meaningful student involvement. And well, we've already heard some ideas today, the Flex, the Hub. So I'm going to ask Jackie, in your work in schools with leaders and students across Saskatchewan, what are some really innovative ways you've seen schools collect and respond to feedback? From your experience, and looking at it from not the check the box activities, but those things that led to the, were powerful catalyst for change.
I'm going to start with this statement. There's only one thing worse than doing nothing about improving the conditions that affect student success in school. And that would be asking students their opinions about those conditions and then doing nothing. So I think the agency there of where we listen and we respond is so very important. And so I have had unique privilege of coordinating efforts to administer and respond to student voice across Saskatchewan for 10 years. And as such, I've witnessed so many exemplary examples where schools, divisions, First Nation education authorities, communities, and provincial initiatives have been able to use student voice as a catalyst. So where student voice becomes agency, where voice drives improvement. So with that in mind, I'm going to try go through a bunch of examples, and I'll just give you a taste of each one of those examples. One elementary school started a Grit to Grad program. It was a whole school initiative where they began to support students in their pursuit of graduation and beyond. They raised awareness and built passion for a long-term goal, such as graduation, with keeping in mind the importance of attendance and setting intentional learning goals. So the school partnered with community, staff, family, using OurSCHOOL data to support student engagement in learning and well-being. It was so inspirational to visit the school and see the growth and engagement, not only with the students, but with the families as true partners. One of the interesting things that I remember is when visiting each staff member, all staff members, not just teachers, but all staff members had their graduation pictures up throughout the school, showing that this was an intentional, we made it, like, let's keep this in mind. I love that. Another school, following their OurSCHOOL implementation, started an OurSCHOOL club after the implementation, where they had focus groups that would delve into the results. So using that, they started to use students as these focus groups. So the teachers in the school selected 10 students from a cross section of student body to meet weekly, interpret data, create responsive actions, delve into discussions. They provided lunch for that. So they said that there was a cost involved, but it was well worth the cost because they really saw themselves as partners in learning. In another school, a principal started to notice a growing percentage of students that were reporting high levels of anxiety, particularly amongst her grade 4 students. So concerned about this, they started to implement what they call counselor in the classroom initiative. And that counselor started to work in the classroom and started to look at questions. What is anxiety? How does it feel? What does it look like? What can we do in response to those feelings of anxiousness? And they were able to then use their OurSCHOOL data to inform the cohorts and their actions forward. Saw a huge reduction in the percentage of students that were reporting high levels of anxiety. Going on to a provincial initiative, talk about the mental health capacity building program. It's an exciting program that's going across Saskatchewan, where they're focusing on positive mental health and well-being in schools, families, and communities. But their aim is to enhance the protective factors and reduce the risk factors related to mental health and well-being. And it's based on the comprehensive health model. Each year, they are using the student voice collected by our school as one of the metrics to inform the program forward. So one example of the metric that we're using is that of inclusive environment within schools. that would be measures of positive sense of belonging, feeling safe at school, not experiencing bullying, exclusion, and harassment, cultural awareness of their own and others. So that has become a key metric to inform their program forward. Another initiative that the Ministry of Justice has taken on is called the Northern Alcohol Strategy. And they are using data about students' beliefs about alcohol and their behaviors to create a community response addressing alcohol abuse and supporting well-being. So this strategy has partnered together with the schools in that area to collect the data through OurSCHOOL and inform their strategic response, which is excellent. At the division level, the examples that come to mind is one school division that was concerned about their increasing disparity between First Nations and non-First Nations students that were reporting in terms of sense of belongings, safety, and other experiences in school. And they wanted to learn more about that. So they added a demographic question to the survey so that students could identify their home community, sending school community to that school. And this allowed the school and division to disaggregate their student voice by sending community so that they could learn how each of those communities were experiencing that transition and the feeling of well-being and safety when they came to that school. This supported their work to improve those conditions for those sending communities. Another school community in their June leadership gathering, they have all of their principals present their school's experiences around student engagement, including their OurSCHOOL data. And as they collaborate in that, they have an opportunity to learn from each other, focused, intentional learning about engagement and that data at the division level. Each school in another school division has student-friendly data walls up in their school, all around their school, where they demonstrate, we asked, we heard, and this is what we're doing in response. It was visually evident as to what they were doing. So anyone visiting the school would easily see what they were hearing from students and what they were doing in response. Another example is each of the high school teachers in one division used the OurSCHOOL results, and they delved deeper into it to determine a classroom level response. So they each created a poster or some kind of a note of what they were doing to let students know, this is what I heard from the survey, and this is what I intend to do differently in my classroom in response. Each of these efforts showing teachers and students as partners in their learning. So, close, I would say, data without response is really ineffective. It's just information. But it's very powerful information. When you listen to students and let them know that you're hearing what they're saying and what you plan to do as a result, it can be so powerful in changing student voice to agency. Okay.
Thanks, Jackie, for sharing those. And I remember when I first started working for the Learning Bar, you had shared some excellent examples of data walls in schools and, what we aspire, those conversations that we want all schools to be having around the data, not just the OurSCHOOL data, but, all pieces of data that make an impact in decision making. So as we start to wrap up here, I just want to acknowledge that some schools, those of you listening today, maybe you're just starting to embed student voice and agency into the fabric of your school culture, and it can feel overwhelming. There's lots of ideas out there, but Sarah, I'd like to bring it back to you and ask you what advice you would give to schools that are just starting to embed student voice and agency into their culture. So thinking about those first steps that really matter, the mindset shifts that they should prioritize.
So this is our third year. We're just wrapping up our third year with the OurSCHOOL survey, and we'll be going into another 3 years with it. So going into it, I think the biggest piece is going into it with an open mind, a willingness to be flexible. Knowing your relationship with the students is a big piece, because you are going to get feedback on the OurSCHOOL survey that you might not have realized that was some of the issues that the students were having, and making sure not to take that information personal, taking it with a grain of salt and to move forward, taking it as something that, we want to be better for our students. Because I think the biggest piece is having those relationships, but that the school becomes the student school. A lot of times our students come in, they learn, and then they go home. And the biggest piece is making sure that we're creating our school communities around our students and what their needs are. We might think we know what their needs are, but a lot of times when we would get this data back, it wasn't exactly what we thought it was. We thought we were doing certain things the right way, and we really weren't, and we had to make those changes. But I think the biggest piece is not taking it personal, knowing that you will have staff, you have students, people in your school communities, in your overall community that might be resistant to this, because it is a huge way of shifting how you look at your schools, how you see your schools. Because forever and ever it wasn't really about student voice, it was about educating those students, right? And making sure that you're sharing that data with your students. And how you do that is really based on your school community and what works for your school community. One of the ways that, we would celebrate or share our data is at school assemblies, in our newsletters, when we're making policy changes or we're making changes within our schools, saying, okay, according to the, based on our data from the survey, 50% of the students felt this way. And so we're making those changes. And these are the ways that we're making it. Because I think the biggest piece is, in order for students to feel that they're having the voice and seeing the changes, making sure that you are sharing that, data for that change within your school. So, but the hardest piece for our staff was some of our teachers not taking it personal, because it's not personal, really. It's not personal at all. It's just being better for our students. So, yeah.
Thanks so much, Sarah. I think that's a really important reminder that you've given us, the adapting for your context. And I know when Joel and we do engagement sessions, and one of the things we always, years ago when we started the engagement sessions was, these are some ideas, but how do you adapt to your context as you're working with the data and the initiatives that you undertake. So we have about 2 minutes before I'd like to open it up to questions. So I'd like to go back to Noel, Vanessa, Jacqueline. Any last words of inspiration for those who have joined us today?
I think I'll jump in, and it's a lot more about letting go than it is about being active. So coming off Sarah's remarks, getting students involved in discussions about dealing with those challenges that they express. The anonymity of OurSCHOOL really allows them to have a voice that we don't usually hear. Many educators are very surprised and in a disappointing way at students' perception of their experience at school versus what teachers think are going on. And this is a huge discrepancy between what we used to call in the 70s when I went to teachers college, the overt and the covert curriculum. The overt overtakes literally the covert curriculum, what students really need and the way they deal with challenges. And if the discussions we have with students following surveys like OurSCHOOL bring to the surface these issues that we're not conscious of, there's a need to really let go. And I would emphasize more than anything of administrators to kind of let go. When we see them letting go, teachers rise to the occasion very quickly, students do as well. So there's not a need to, manage change as much as accompany the people they work with through their own change process. There's too much of a top-down approach, the phenomenon of the director general or the superintendent, as they're calling the rest of the country, the superintendent going to a conference and being wowed by a guru or some specific exciting program to them and coming in and unleashing it upon the school or the school board without really understanding the dynamics board wide or even more in a more complex way, school by school. So I think the lesson is letting go. Wherever we've let go, things flourish. And I don't mean just abandoning, but getting out of the driver's seat. Let teachers drive the classroom. Let students drive the curriculum. That would be my 2 cents of inspiration. Thanks.
No,
I
thank you.
appreciate that, Noel, and I echo that and say just to remember data are mere numbers, and it's the collective inquiry between students and the school community that builds that bridge to improve teaching and learning. And so when those numbers come in, as you say, not to take that personally, but maybe choosing 1 or 2 ways that you can respond, actually show, I mean, not starting out with 25, but rather choosing 1 or 2 that have really spoken to you, that you know that you have agency over, and to work with students in building that collective bridge. It just needs to start small, but that collective inquiry can build relationships and therefore change outcomes for students.
And I think like the biggest piece in all of it is making, engagement is key to having success with the survey. And engaging all of your school community, making sure that everyone is aware, and creating opportunities for students to have success with that engagement, I think is probably one of the biggest things that you can do, because if you don't have engagement, you won't see success within the survey or even with the data. So that's a big piece as well.
And if you're here today, that means you're already a step in the right direction. And it's been really great to talk to you all today. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks. I'd like to open it up for questions now. Not sure if we had any questions in our chat.
There is one in the Q&A section, Lorna.
Okay.
Did you want me to read it?
Yes, please.
All right. So this question is, in my experience, I've seen flexible time periods in high schools begin with promise, supporting self-directed learning, one-on-one time with teachers, or involvement in extracurricular activities. But over time, the structure often breaks down. Issues like students skipping the period, wandering the halls, or not engaging meaningfully tend to arise. Given that the goal is to empower students and provide tailored support, how would you respond to an administration that has tried flex time before and is now hesitant to re-implement due to these past challenges?
That is a wonderful question.
It is.
Gonna go to Noel and Vanessa.
Vanessa, I'll go to you for that. You're welcome.
Well, it's first of all going to be highly contextual. But the number one recommendation I would have would be to reflect on the practices and structures that had gotten you to the original flex, and the use of that flex, and then to interrogate the role of students along the way and to what extent they were involved in the culture and pedagogy building process that got the school to where it was, and then notice where there was a lack of student voice, and then try and bring them into that process so that they have a seat at the table when reimagining what it could look like. And I would also recommend baby steps. Start smaller than immediately jumping back into what it was, and just come back to the drawing table and do small things over time to build people's capacity for something renewed.
And I would add the concept of fail forward. People are willing to go along with change as long as you recognize the errors as you go, and people are willing to help and step in, including students. The other piece I would suggest, and something that I was suggesting over the last couple of months, as that same problem existed for us and has become less and less by having an academic component as well as an interest component in Flex. but also the notion of a course called What I'd Like to Know or What I'd Like to Share. So a course where students could just go, there's no preset curriculum, but they're helping them explore something they want to learn about. Could be anything, or something that they're already good at. You know, I'm good at skateboarding, so I'm going to give a course. I'm going to give a course to other students who are interested in skateboarding or whatever. So again, giving that kind of sense of, sense or also practice of students running pedagogy, running courses. And that might help rather than the usual, catchment area where we send everybody who doesn't like a course or isn't in a course into the library for mayhem, collective mayhem, rather than looking for creative ways of engaging students in learning on their own terms. Thanks. Oh, I should mention, I mentioned the OECD study. That would be very interesting for people, the most successful innovative practices worldwide. It's a project, if you go on the OECD site, it's a project called ILE, Innovative Learning Environments. There are 4 comprehensive publications, starting with a theoretical basis, forget her last name, Diamond, and a number of other prominent educators. Secondly, to design work around. Thirdly, was a report on the successful schools. And fourthly, looking forward. So very, very interesting. We wish at the beginning of our project we had read that. We would have taken us 1 year to do the research instead of 4. But so it'll save you all that amount of time. Fascinating read. Unfortunately, you have to pay for it unless you have access in other ways. Even university library sites don't have access for free. But we were able by, I don't want to make a flood of contacts, but if you contact somebody in the OECD, they might be a little more liberal about giving access to educators. Thanks.
No, thank you, Noel and Vanessa. And I should have mentioned, if I didn't at the beginning, that we're going to follow up with these links and resources when we send out the recording to all the participants that have registered. So, are there any more questions out there? You could feel free to unmute yourself, or if there's any more in the chat. I'll just practice my teacher wait time here.
Talk among yourselves.
Well, seeing no questions, I'd like to thank each one of our panelists today, Jacqueline, Noel, Vanessa, and Sarah. Thank you so much for inspiring us, sharing your wisdom and your experiences. And for all of you who've joined us today, I think it's been a really interesting and passionate discussion. I'd like to leave you with a few words of inspiration that came across my desk this morning. I was reading an article in Teacher Magazine, just happened to be on Student Voice and Agency. And Joe Earp, the editor of Teacher Magazine, said, "Young people have an incredible capacity for change. They come with a critical eye and a hopeful heart, which is a combination that can bring about great change." I just love that hopeful heart. So that critical eye. So on behalf of today's panelists in the Learning Bar, we wish you great success in nurturing and engaging the learners in your school community. So thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.